So what's your perception when you see a big bald-headed inmate standing on a TEDx stage wearing prison blues? Are you thinking, I wonder what that guy did? Or look at those tattoos, he must be one of those white supremacists or a gang member. Are you curious to what the reality may be? You see, the reality for me is, and the truth is under this bald head and these few tattoos lies a former corrections officer and 911 dispatcher, and most importantly, family man. So with that said, why would someone have those original perceptions? Could it be because of what we see on television or in the media when it comes to someone who looks like me? Or is it the simple fact that obviously I must have done something wrong because I'm standing here today in these prison blues talking to you fine folks? From 1998 to 2007, I was married with 6 children. 4 of those children were my biological children, and 2 were my stepchildren. I had a lot of responsibility, and in having that responsibility, I was blessed to land a job at our local city police department as a corrections officer. Up to this point in my life, I'd never been in any trouble, with the exception of maybe a few speeding tickets and failing to license my dog. But my perception at that time is that if you did anything worse than that, then you must have been a hardened criminal. So in my job starting out, I was so proud to wear the uniform, and I gave that job everything I had every day to be the best I could. But as time went on, and I started to see how ugly our world has become, as night after night when arrests came in, people were often drunk, high, very volatile at times, and sometimes much worse. I started having thoughts in my head about how could life be so bad for someone that they just keep coming back to jail or prison over and over again. And I started wondering if there was anything I could say or do to possibly make a difference. But at the time, I felt like I was just a corrections officer, and that there were judges and other people that dealt with these things, so on many nights I kept quiet and I did my job. One night, as I was doing a jail check, I ran across a female inmate named Marilyn. Marilyn was a frequent visitor to our jail who dealt with domestic violence, drugs, and so much worse. I found Marilyn with a sheet tied around her neck, and she had climbed up on the bars of her cell and was attempting to tie the other end to the top in an attempt to possibly take her life. I entered the cell, and I began to talk to Marilyn and listen to her story. And as I was listening, I started to realize that Marilyn's problems were not so much different from maybe yours or ours. All Marilyn wanted was someone to care and someone to listen. And so I listened, and I cared. And Marilyn came down, and we got her the help that she needed and deserved. Not too long after this incident, as my perception was beginning to change, I took a transfer to the 911 dispatch area of our department. Being a first responder is a very high-stress job, as you have the lives of the public, police officers, and firefighters in your hands every second. One night I received another phone call from a female named Nancy. Nancy told me that she had a gun and that her life was no longer worth living and that she couldn't take it anymore. So I began talking to Nancy, and just, my heart really went out to Nancy. And as we got our officers out to her residence in hopes of ending this peacefully, Nancy asked if we could do a 3-way hookup with her son. And so we did, in hopes that maybe we could end this situation peacefully. Things seemed to be going well for several minutes. And then all of a sudden, Nancy's son got upset with his mother. He said, "Mom, I don't care what you do. Go ahead and kill yourself." And he hung up the phone. Seconds later, all I heard was a pop. Our officers went in the home, to find that Nancy had stuck the gun in her mouth and pulled the trigger. It was at this moment where I started to seriously realize and consider how important a human's life is. And that for me to continue to preconceive things about people is something that I can no longer do. And I just have to be the best I can and try to help. So at this point, you might be asking yourself, how did Mr. CO and dispatcher end up in prison? Well, in early 2007, my wife and I were doing the best we could to provide for our 6 children. At this point, my stepdaughters were 12 and 14 years of age. Both of them had separate fathers who were both deceased. And so I took on the role of being the father. I was pretty tough on them. I showed them a lot of tough love in order to hopefully teach them responsibility and keep them out of trouble. My relationship with them, though, was very different from the relationship with my 4 biological children. One night, my wife and I found information that indeed revealed that my stepdaughters were sexually active with their prospective boyfriends. This, in turn, caused chaos in our household. And living in fear that my stepdaughters would face teen pregnancy or worse, we banned the boys from coming to the home and told them they couldn't see them anymore. Within a week's period, my stepdaughters went to other friends and family members and accused me of rape. From there, the nightmare began. Of course, the police get called, children's services get called. Things cascade really quick. We took the girls and had SANE exams done, and those SANE exams proved that the girls were in fact sexually active, but no DNA from me was ever found. I volunteered and took a polygraph test, and I passed that test. I did everything I could do to prove I would never do such a horrible thing. However, once the media caught wind of this, I literally went from a public service hero to a monster in a blink of an eye. I was arrested and indicted pending trial. At first, I was offered a 10-year and then a 5-year deal if I would plead guilty. But being someone who worked for the justice system and believing in them, and believing that the truth would set me free, I said no, because I believed the truth would indeed set me free. But after 7 months in the county jail, in a 1-week trial that was pretty grueling, I was convicted on what they call circumstantial evidence and sentenced to 40 years flat with no parole. So now you can see how perception has a way of changing everything. Coming to prison was a shock, but in many ways I think I knew what to expect. I was called many names, had Bibles thrown at me, and people's perception of me is that I'm a sexual predator. No matter how many times I've tried to explain my situation, many doubt me, and I guess that's really to be expected. But I made a promise to God and myself when I came to prison that I was not going to let the negativeness of prison change me, and that I was going to try to stay involved in everything positive I could. So in the last 3 years, I've been blessed enough to be a mentor in the Horizon Prison Initiative here at Marion. Horizon is a dorm with 48 men of all different faiths living together in hopes of changing their character and becoming stronger in their individual faiths. Horizon gives me a peace, an unexplainable peace that sometimes makes me feel like I'm here for a reason. I pray every day that I'll get to go home. But until that day, I still see it as my duty, just like it was back in my past careers, is to help other men understand that if they use their potential for good instead of evil, then we can make a big difference in this world. Thank you.